You got a LiDAR X7, Trimble X7 a couple years ago, and it was a steep learning curve to learn the finer points of the workflow of LiDAR scanning and then turning that into, a Revit model.
So I made it my mind that it was going to happen when I scanned a 100,000 square foot hospital that was in operation, right? So there's patients, there's surgery, there's ICU, there's ER, and all of that was going on.
All right, so this is Bryce Perez here, and today we are meeting with Matt Crowder to talk about what we got going on in the LiDAR space, both in my neck of the woods as well as in your neck of the woods. Tell us, Matt, a little bit about who you are and what you're doing these days.
Sure. So I own a company, MAPP3D Solutions. We operate out of Indianapolis, Indiana, although either through myself or through subcontractors, I do service people nationally. I've got clients all over the United States. And then I've got a couple clients who themselves are national. So I get plenty of work in different states as well. I only travel for the big jobs, of course, but there's lots of people out there who have the equipment or even the skill set to collect the data, and then I'll process it afterwards. So I've created like a nice little niche that way. Mostly what I do up to this point is scan buildings and spaces to create Revit and CAD models for architects and engineers. What about you? I don't know a whole lot about what you do. So,
well, I mean, you hire us to do some scans for you in this neck of the woods. Like, you should have put that into the equation.
Oh, sure. But what do you do when I'm not hiring you? You do the same thing?
Oh, okay, yeah. So overall, globally, my main gig is real estate, things that revolve around land and development. And so I built this company called 3D Virtually there, and its main function has been, since the inception, to support the activities of, what I do in brokerage. So, real estate can be anything from, buildings and to land. And so, we started out with 3D tours, particularly with Matterport and photography. And now we're doing, premium photography and property videos. I know that just sounds real like basic and what a lot of other people do out there. I mostly do it for my listings and a select few people, mostly enterprise clients, and of course the referrals that come from companies like such as yours, which are much appreciated, and architects here locally. You got a LiDAR X7, Trimble X7 a couple years ago, and it was a steep learning curve to learn the finer points of the workflow of LiDAR scanning and then turning that into a Revit model, and just grasping the full spectrum of what that is.
Yeah.
And then being able to speak to it to people, to tell them like, this is what I have and this is what it can do, because in the reality, and maybe you can really add to this point, is architects and surveyors have done things a certain way because of the legacy adoption, right? They were trained to do things a certain way. Their levels of accuracy and tolerances have a certain standard, which are compared to the LiDAR world, is really easy to hit, really easy to surpass. And so they're real skeptical. They question, like, okay, is it good enough for me? And the question is this, dude, it's like 100 times good enough for you, bro. Like, we're going to give you stuff you've never had before. So I want you to tell me what your experience has been to bring architects to like, oh yeah, this is good.
Yeah, I mean, so a lot of them back in the early days, I used to actually do jobs at cost, a couple, for a new client, to show them what I'm capable of doing. So I was able to actually score quite a few clients that way. Now I've got enough of a reputation with the clients that I currently have that it's a lot easier to get that credibility now. So one of the first questions I always ask when somebody's talking to me about it or asking me about it is like, what level of accuracy do you need? And most of the time they're like, as long as it's good within an inch. And I'm like, yeah, I can do way better than that. So yeah, no, I know exactly what you're talking about. I think that a lot of them just have like misconceptions because the first time they checked out LiDAR was a decade ago, right? And technology's come so far since then, but they're still stuck on what they saw a decade ago, anecdotally. And yeah, so you got to kind of like train them out of what they think it can do.
When you started, did you start out with like say Matterport, or did you like when did you graduate towards the
Sure.
more
So
pro
that's
tools?
no, that's a great question. So in 2020, so I started off as a real estate photographer, not specifically a real estate photographer. I was a commercial photographer in general, but I was doing real estate photography as well. Started my business in September of 2019, and then March 2020 rolls around, and COVID happens. So now I have no business at all, right? So I'm trying to find a way to pivot, and in the real estate business, I've learned about Matterport. I knew about Matterport, but I wanted to take it commercially, right? So like it's COVID, nobody can go anywhere. So let's bring the where to them. And one of the niches I found with Matterport when I bought my Matterport camera in May of 2020 was maternity wards for hospitals, because hospitals weren't allowing guests, but women who are expecting like to take tours of where they're going to be giving birth. They couldn't do that. So the hospitals hired me to do a virtual tour of the maternity ward and then teach their nurses how to give a virtual tour over a Zoom call to the expecting mothers to kind of walk them around the facility. So that was cool, right? I got curious as to how Matterport was stitching these tours together in real time. Like, how does it know where it was and where it is now? And that's when I started learning about, structured lighting and LiDAR. And I'm thinking to myself, how else can I use this? So I started doing research online and stuff like that, and found out about, creating as-builts for architects, documenting existing conditions so they can start a redesign project when they don't have current drawings. And I realized that Matterport probably wasn't accurate enough for that, especially the Pro 2 at the time, because I mean, that was accurate with a 2%. So you're going to gain or lose 6 inches every 50 feet, which is horrible. So I started reaching out to architects on LinkedIn, and because it was COVID, and because they were sitting at home bored, they actually gave me the time of day. I'm like, look, hey, I'm thinking about starting a business doing this. I'd love to pick your brain to see how I can provide value. And some of them are actually like, yeah, I'll give you 20 minutes. So got on, Zoom calls with architects and got some ideas and learned some things and figured out how to provide value. And then January 2021, bought my first BLK 360,
Oh, okay.
just financed it. And then I had my first job with one of those architects I'd reached out to on LinkedIn in February of 2021. And that particular company that he was working for at the time is still, to this day, one of my biggest clients.
So
So
did that
that's kind
that
of how I got
grew
into it.
over time?
Oh yeah, it grew. I would say that it roughly doubled every year up until this year. This year I don't have the numbers yet, obviously, because this year's barely halfway over. But yeah, it doubled in gross revenue every year for like 4 years in a row.
Then, then at what point did you decide, okay, I'm going to go from the stationary scanner, the LiDAR scanner. So maybe, because not everybody knows these terms. We'll just say, so a stationary scanner is going to be basically a scanner that sits on a tripod and it turns around to document everything around it. So at what point did you go from, okay, I'm going to go from this stationary device to a one that I can hold in my hand and walk around a building to speed things up? Like when did that switch happen?
So I made it my mind that it was going to happen when I scanned a 100,000 square foot hospital that was in operation, right? So there's patients, there's surgery, there's ICU, there's ER, and all of that was going on while I'm trying to scan with this stationary tripod scanner. And it took pretty much the better part of a week to get that job done. And I'm like, I got to find a more efficient way to do this. Well, I already knew about the BLK to go, but it was an expensive piece of equipment. I think when I bought it, it was around 52,000. It's gone up now, but I was just starting to get larger and larger jobs, and a lot of these jobs weren't necessarily empty buildings. And I wanted to be fast, I wanted to be efficient, and I wanted to cause the least amount of disruption to my, the architect's clients as possible. So the mobile scanner just made sense. I bought that in August of 2023, probably a couple months after I scanned that hospital. Finally made that purchase, and yeah, I haven't looked back, because with that thing I can do 100,000 square feet in a day easy.
What did that do to your world? I mean, what it like I kind of know the answer to that, but I want the details.
I mean, everything's so much more efficient. I mean, I can finish a job that would normally take 4 or 5 days in an 8-hour day. And of course, my wife's like, I bet your clients are going to be happy. It costs less money now. I'm like, no, that's not how that works.
The
No, that's not how it works.
expensive
Just
piece of
because it takes less
equipment.
money doesn't. What's that?
It's expensive pieces of equipment
Yep.
it solves an expensive problem.
And you really should be charging for the value you provide, not for your
Right.
time.
Yeah,
So,
exactly. Yeah, the software is no cheaper as well.
I mean, so I'm providing the same, if not even more value because I'm a less disruption to their clients with this piece of equipment. So I didn't start charging more. Well, I did this year, but yeah, as soon as I got that piece of equipment, I didn't start charging more. I was just faster so I could do more jobs. And because of that, because of the speed and efficiency and the automation of my workflows, it's hard for us to hit capacity. It's hard for us to keep ourselves super busy. So we're always using that extra time to innovate. And what are we going to do next? And, all that fun stuff.
So now that you've had a good amount of time using it's this the name this the type of technology for this handheld device is called SLAM LiDAR for our audience, who's this might be the first time they hear what these things are, and you've had some time to use specifically the BLK to go SLAM LiDAR. In practice, what have you seen its level of accuracy is?
Within, say, 20 to 25 feet, it's pretty reliable. It is subject to drift if you are not using a proper workflow.
Okay.
What I mean by that is don't try to scan an entire, 100,000 square foot hospital in one single go. You're going to do that in chunks, in pieces. So I'm going to scan this area. I'm going to scan this area. And what I do is I have a second person running that tripod scanner that creates sort of the backbone of the point cloud, right? So he'll go down the main hallway and he'll go up each staircase and into each landing with the 360 and uses that to connect all of the BLK to go scans that I end up doing. The really small ones to keep everything nice and tight with no drift.
Okay, that's clever. I like that approach.
No,
So essentially,
it works really well.
so you're using two different pathways to bring it together.
Mm-hmm. So the 360, the one on the tripod, I have the Gen 2, so it's accurate within roughly 4 millimeters. And then the to go is accurate, I believe, 6 millimeters within 10 meters. So within 38 feet. So I just keep it under 30 feet to make sure I maintain, the tightest accuracy I can. So even 6 millimeters, that's roughly a little bit less than a quarter inch. That's still pretty darn good.
Yeah, and in their world, a quarter of an inch, in most cases, is very acceptable for them, right?
Oh, yeah.
And
It's
so,
nothing.
like in the surveyor's world, what is it? 3 centimeters and 3 centimeter, right? It's 3 centimeters.
Something like that.
Yeah, 3 to 5 centimeters of accuracy, which is like a couple of inches, right?
Well, 3 centimeters would be an inch roughly.
And yeah, so with the use of LiDAR equipment to hit that benchmark is real easy to get. So the engineering, we'll just call them the architects and the surveyors and slash engineers, they have tended to highly guard the specifications that they use to do their work, and then when you get in the weeds with him about that, they will eventually tell you what that is, and it's like it didn't have to be that hard to get to that conclusion. So let's see how
They like to overthink things, so.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, to overthink. And I think that kind of like brings us to this point of I know my biggest challenge with working with people, particularly ones that know that they need this, but they don't really know why they need it other than their architect told them they need it. And then the architect's like, yeah, I want to try this new workflow because we're going to be doing Revit now, and they want to up their game. They want to level up, and they're putting their toes in the water, if you will, into 3D design, and so they're tipping their toes into they don't own it. This is like the starting point, the starting journey of what this stuff is, and we're as a service provider, we're bringing them some value to something that historically has taken them a lot of time and a lot of people, their understudies, their interns, their junior associates, to go out in the field for them to measure, to bring it together in hopes that they can piece it together. And it takes a lot of time to go from start to like where we can start planning, where they can start planning their proposed new design. Anyways, long story short, I've always find that my biggest hurdle is educating the client as to what we're doing and how we're going to do it for them. And I've not just from explaining what we're going to do, but then what they could do with it. Like, well, what have you done to like make this we'll call it a consultative approach to bring your clients to a place of like, yeah, I get what we're doing. I get what the game plan is.
Just like as far as explaining to them like they're five. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah,
Explain.
like explaining the tech, taking the complexity of the tech and distilling it to like just this simple concept they grasp. Like, yeah, okay, I get what we're doing here.
Sure. So, I mean, most of them have seen one of those like little laser measures that you pop against the wall, shoot a laser across the room, and it gives you a measurement. Most of them have seen that. So I'm like, you've used a laser measure before, right? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, do you trust it? They're like, yeah. My scanner does the exact same thing. It's the exact same technology, but my scanner does it 500,000 times a second in like a 360 sphere, right? So it's capturing everything all at once. And then I do multiple scans with, plenty of overlap, plenty of surface overlap. And then my software, when I get back to the office, puts all those together into an overall larger set of measurements that I then give to my engineer, who takes that, imports it into Revit, and is able to use that data to create an accurate Revit model. That's pretty much the best way I've come up with to explain it to people who don't understand the technology.
Yeah.
I compare it to something they're already familiar with and already trust.
Right, yeah. Some of the approaches that I've taken to explain it is I've had to create sort of a presentation, sort of mini explanation of the different parts of it and the whys and the hows, and because I feel like the people that are hiring us to do these things and the consultants that hire them to say that you need to get this done, they don't. I feel like they don't in 100% fully grasp the impact of what they can do with this as we'll call it as a digital investment in their property, right? If you want to call it that.
Yeah.
So with laying sort of that groundwork of we're creating digital copies, digital blueprints of these buildings. What do you foresee is the uses, like what's the potential of uses, and what do you think the future of this is?
Oh, it has a ton of potential, especially with the new AI stuff that's coming out that can auto-classify things that it sees in the point cloud. Like AI will look at the point cloud and recognize a door, a window, a wall, a ceiling, a floor, and will automatically classify those within the point cloud. So now you have a classified point cloud you can bring into Revit. Revit can read that information and see that this is a door, this is a wall, this is a ceiling, and just automatically start laying those out to create a foundational starting point. And then you might need some human intervention to come in and kind of like do some QA, look at it. Maybe this wasn't a door. Maybe it just looked like a door, so I need to fix that. So little fixes, but it's still going to greatly increase the speed at which that modeling can be done. So instead of taking a week to model a 20,000 square foot office, it could take hours. So just the speed at which everything can happen. And unfortunately, that's going to commoditize a lot of what architects do. And I've had this conversation with many architects. They feel that their profession, which has been respected for thousands of years, really,
yeah.
It is now being commoditized because of AI. So buildings still need to be measured. AI can't go to an empty building and measure it. So I feel like my job's secure because those measurements still have to be taken. But then after the whole processing after that can be all automated with AI, and that's the future as far as what we do.
Yeah, ultimately, somewhere down the road in the future, we might all be displaced by a new species of highly intelligent robots that can do everything better than we can. But in the interim, we can play orchestra conductor and quarterback on the field. Maybe you can give us some examples of one of your most interesting scans.
Sure. I've got a couple pulled up here. Let me share my screen here. So this is one of them. This is Saks Fifth Avenue at a mall. And Saks Fifth Avenue was moving out of the space. So the mall owner, Simon Property Group, hired me to go and scan the building because they're going to go and turn this into a mixed use space. They're going to cut away maybe a third of it, create green space and create an event center and some non-retail office space. But this was a fun job. This was a little over 100,000 square feet. And, we were able to get all of that information so they can just take it and start redesigning the way they wanted it.
Oh, that's cool.
So yeah, entire floors, including that escalator in the middle.
So
no basement. But
So, in terms of to talk the language of Revit, some our audience may, some of our audience may not know what the language is, but what is the level of detail that you drew this in? Like, how did you and the client come up with the level of detail that you decided to draw this as?
sure. So on the interior, it was LOD 200, which is approximate geometry. So you got your floors, doors, ceiling, windows, all that fun stuff. No real minute details or anything like that. No materials, none of that. On the exterior, on the facade, they wanted LOD 350, which is exact geometry with materials documented. Even like these little decorative trim things. These were custom models based on what was there instead of using some generic item within Revit. Like this glass dome. That's not just a generic piece of glass. It was actually modeled. This little structure here was modeled exactly the way it is in reality. So this one was a mix of levels of detail, the exterior being higher because they plan on keeping a lot more of the exterior than the interior. So they wanted that information. Now, as another type of level of detail, most of this does not include mechanical, plumbing, electrical, all that stuff.
Okay.
But hallways, in these little hallways here, they wanted all that information. So if you go down these hallways, you're going to find HVAC, plumbing, electrical, all of that stuff. So again, two different levels of detail in this model. You got out here no MEP, no mechanical, electrical, and plumbing, and these little service hallways, they wanted the mechanical, electrical, and plumbing.
So that brings up the note where when a client calls, an architect says, "Hey, I want a drawing." Everyone assumes that all drawings are equal, they're all the same, but it really is bespoke, right? You have to have a consultation with the client, ask them what their full and final needs are, so that you can give them a budget of their drawing and a timeline that is what they need and not something they don't need. So
Absolutely.
yeah, so you guys talked about what you needed and where it needed to be.
Yeah, we actually walked the space beforehand, and she was pointing out, "Hey, I need this here, I need this here," and I've taken notes the whole time. It's interesting that you say that. Every architect that I work for, just about every single one of them has their own way that they want things done, right? So
Yep.
you have that bespoke approach there, and
Yep.
then even within those architecture firms or that individual architect, different jobs need different things done. Like
Yep.
this job may need above the ceiling scanning with mechanical, electrical, and plumbing above the ceiling, but the next job doesn't because they're not doing anything with that. So architect to architect, and then even from that job to job, it's all going to be different. You need to ask those questions and have a really clear understanding of expectations of what's going to be provided, because it can lead to some sticky situations if you get the job done and you spent a couple of weeks modeling this really large job and it doesn't contain the information they want.
Yeah, so two more specific questions about drawing, which they might seem like really small questions, but they are actually very significant when we're talking about putting a drawing together of a building. Do you always assume the drawing is going to be in drafting conditions? Or do you want real world conditions or drafting conditions?
I always provide real world. That's not something I even ask because it's like real world is better than drafting, right? So if it's real world conditions, then it will meet drafting expectations.
So maybe we should tell the audience like what that is. What's the difference? Because it's a small detail that's really important that may be overlooked and is makes a world of a difference.
Sure. So I mean, real world conditions, you're creating what's known as an as built. You were documenting the structure as it has been built. Whereas drafting conditions are typically what it was meant to be. Now, most buildings, the original CAD drawings that the building was built off of, almost no building is exactly to the T what that drawing was, right? So you have that, but after the fact, things are going to be different. You need as-built conditions if you're going to do anything with the structure. So I automatically do as-built. I automatically do real-world conditions. So I
Yeah,
don't even ask.
yeah. So like when it comes to walls that are not perpendicular or floors that are not entirely level, how do you handle that discussion with the architect?
So that's all based off of the level of detail that they want. So back to the LOD 200, that's approximate geometry, which means if you're 89.5 degree angle wall, it's going to be it's going to be done at 90 degrees, unless the wall is like 20 feet long, in which case that half a degree makes a big difference down at the other end, right? But if it's a 4 foot wall, it's 89.5 degrees. It's going to be modeled at 90 degrees at LOD 200. At LOD 300 or 350, it will be modeled at 89.5 degrees. Or same with floors. Floors are going to be level at LOD 200. At 300 and 350, that's exact geometry, so it's going to be modeled as is. So it really depends on. That's another conversation I have with the architect. What level of detail do you need? Approximate geometry or exact geometry? And then, of course, that does change the price because that is more difficult to model.
Yeah. The other one that's an easy detail to overlook is, some architects might be new to Revit, and so they might be using standard libraries of everything that's in their drawings. But some architects might have an in-depth use of Revit and evolved, and they might have their own libraries and their own title blocks. They might have like a whole template that they work with. How do you handle that part of the discussion?
The very first time I work with them, I let them know, if you have a template, send it to me.
Yeah,
because we will use their template. And this right here, you'll notice like a lot of these extra pages are not even really used. Like it's gonna be completely blank. And that's because this was this company's template. They got their logo up here. That was this company's template, but because they have all this extra stuff that we just didn't use for this project. So yeah, this is an example of something that was built off of somebody else's template. I probably have maybe half a dozen clients who want me to model off their template. The other ones don't care.
So, the first time I had come up I once had a project where I asked them if they had a template, and they're like, yeah, we have a template, but we're not going to use it. Don't worry about it. Deliver the point cloud. We deliver the Revit model. They start to look at it, and then they come back to me and say, oh, yeah, we have to remodel this whole thing because we need to remodel it in our library. Again, it's one of those little small details that are important when you ask the question, and maybe I didn't emphasize enough the importance of that detail. And so I guess, real world drafting condition or real world conditions or drafting conditions is an important detail, as is drafting with a template, is important if somebody's libraries are really important to them. When I saw you at GeoWeek, right? We were GeoWeek in Denver 2025 recently, a couple months ago. It was exciting to come together with reality capture experts in our annual meeting. And that's when I brought up the topic of, hey, let's get together and do a podcast, which we're doing here today. And really, first of all, I want to thank you for making the time to meet with me. And we were both talking about the things that we wanted to see at the show. And we both talked about aerial LiDAR. And I was just on a window shopping, not ready to commit to anything at the moment, but you made a commitment, you bought something, and it's definitely something I'm very interested in. And I want to know a lot more about how's your experience been with your aerial LiDAR? Maybe you could tell us a little bit about what you picked, why you picked it, and how it's been going.
Sure. So I ended up purchasing a DJI MAPP3D 350 RTK. I was looking at some American versions because if you're going to do any defense work, you can't use DJI. The reason I made the choice of going DJI is, well, to be perfectly honest, price. Because like the least expensive drone that I could find that would hold that LiDAR package that I wanted was like $30,000. The MAPP3D 350 RTK was like $11,000 or something like that.
Yeah.
And then you add to that with accessories, buying extra batteries and stuff like that. But I mean, the price difference was just crazy. So I mean, and I don't do any defense work right now. So if I ever get hired for a defense job, I'll go out and buy another drone. But until then, I'm happy with what I got. And then for the LiDAR scanner, it's also a SLAM scanner. And for anybody that doesn't know what SLAM means, it stands for simultaneous localization and mapping. So it's basically gathering the data as you move and creating that 3D model, knowing where it's at and where it's moving to based off of the data that's collecting. Anyways, that SLAM scanner mounts underneath the drone. And then, you have certain things like fly lower, fly slower for higher density, You can fly higher. You do have tree canopy penetration, so you can gather topographic data through, trees, which you can't do with photogrammetry, which is another way that you can collect that data. I picked the Rock 3 Pro, just because I really like the level of customer service and support they have on the back end. I mean, we've got our own guy that we're probably annoying with questions right now, just making sure that our workflow's right. We also purchased some survey equipment, what they call GNSS receivers, which are high-end GPS devices. Go on poles, you'll see them.
Yeah. Which brand did you take? Did you do?
Inlet.
Huh?
So
Inlet. Like I'm wearing the shirt. Inlet.
Yeah, we got Inlet RS3.
It's my gym shirt. I wear this.
Nice.
I wear this shirt to the gym.
Did you get that from Geo Week?
Yeah. I really like
nice.
the branding, and I think their equipment is perfect for what.
Oh, the price point's amazing.
Yeah, and then there's that. Yeah.
I mean, like a triple GNSS receiver will cost you $15K. An Inlet RS3 with tilt compensation is like $3K, and it's just as accurate.
So are you saying then that you put ground control points?
We do, and that's something that we're currently working on improving the workflow of. I mean, because I've never used survey equipment before, so this is all brand new. It's a learning curve, like you're talking about. When you're learning how to LiDAR scan in the beginning and mess with point clouds. There's a whole nother learning curve behind using survey equipment to gather ground control points.
Yeah,
so that's something we're currently working on.
How do you get the surveyors that you collaborate with to, accept your ground control points? Like, how do you guys overlap? Do they? I'll let you answer that question, but I want to know how they validate what you do.
Sure. So what we can do is meet them on site. We'll lay down targets, black and white targets that the drone LiDAR can pick up, and let them mark their own ground control points. So they'll put their own gear right there in the middle of the target, take a measurement, and then save that information for later. And then I'll hand them the point cloud, and they can go and click on the center of that target and compare that GPS coordinates, the XY axis along with elevate to the data that they collected, and they can validate it that way.
Okay. Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking too.
Yep.
So what? I mean, can you show us something from?
Yeah. So like here's a scan of a park, and there's a couple cars there, so you can see the scale of this project. And with this, there are no ground control points on this particular one, but I can still show you. We can take a point measurement, and we get X, Y, and Z axis data, and then we can translate that into GPS coordinates. So if there were a ground control point, I could go down here and click right in the middle of the target, wherever it is. Or let's say I wanted to use, let me remove this one. Let's say I wanted to use the end of one of these parking strips, which is totally valid. You can take a GPS measurement at the end of one of these things at the corner and go down here and click on the corner and validate it that way. So there's another way you can do it, but this is one example. If you want to see what's coming.
Do you have Rock Robotic do your drawings for you, or do you have it different?
They can, but between you and me, they're a little pricey.
Okay, I was wondering.
Let me find the right one here. I've got one here here we go, with ground control points. So you can see what a target looks like from the sky.
I think I found the group that does their plane metrics for them. It's a vendor out of, I think, Washington.
Oh yeah? So they hired somebody else to do the planimetrics?
I believe so, yeah, because there's just something about the way they present it that's very similar. There's another Matterport is the same with another company. You could tell who the vendor is. So offline, I'll share that with you.
So there's an example of what the drone sees for that black and white target. It's basically like a checkerboard target.
Yeah.
And then you can just pick a point right there in the middle. That's how you can validate. Obviously, the more dense the scan is, the better it is. But
so when you went from the terrestrial scanning to the aerial scanning, how have you pivoted? How has the pivot gone in terms of finding clients to provide this service for?
Well, fortunately, I've built a fairly decent network in the AEC industry, the architectural engineering and construction industry. So really, it was just a matter of starting to reach out to my network and say, hey, we offer these deliverables now. We can do aerial scanning. I knew some landscape architects already, so I reached out to them and said, hey, I've got this. Let me show you what I can do. I knew some civil engineers. I'm like, hey, This is what we can do. Surveyors, I didn't know a whole lot of surveyors, but I did know one company that does have surveying as a service, and I'm already working with them. I reached out to them because I knew them from being a co-sponsor for the American Institute of Architects. They're structural engineers. They have surveyors that they use, and this job that I'm showing you right now is actually a job that we partnered with them on. So really, that's one way, and then you go from there. You just go word of mouth. Another way is to find out where they congregate. So I sponsor the American Institute of Architects because they have monthly meetings where architects get together to listen to a presentation for continuing education credits. But I get to come and mingle with them for like an hour beforehand, for like networking time, and meet my prospective clients and have conversations with them and tell them what I do. All of these different people, surveyors, civil engineers, landscape architects, they all have their organizations like that. So pay a little bit of money, be a sponsor. They're happy for your sponsorship because you're providing them ways to do things like get continuing education credits. And most of the time, you just don't be a salesy person. Nobody wants to be sold. Make friends there. Make friends and let them know what you do. And that's how I built my business.
So I bet you have some interesting stories, some more so on the less technical side of things. What would be like one of the craziest or most unexpected things you've seen or had to scan in your time of doing this?
Sure. So one time we scanned a rather high-end house that a guy had just moved into, and he hired an architect that was a client of mine to do an addition. So the architect had me scan the house, so he had existing conditions, and we found a black hole in the point cloud where it just didn't make sense. So we were kind of exploring and found that there was an actual hidden room, like the kind where you like push on a wall panel and it pops out and you can open it up and go in. That was kind of cool.
Oh, and you found it.
Yeah.
So you looked in all the possible walls, and then you found the entry point.
Yeah. Yeah, there were only 3 options as far as 3 rooms where it could be, and I already had the point cloud there, so I knew where to look. And then they had just like this wood paneled wall, not like the 60s wood paneling, but like really nice wood design paneling on the wall. And I just kept looking until I saw a seam there, and I'm just like click click, and it just popped right open. It was pretty neat. That's probably the most unexpected thing I found.
And the guy that owned it didn't even know that it was there.
He had just bought the house.
They didn't even tell him.
Yeah, they didn't tell him, and he hadn't. The house was empty. He hadn't even moved his furniture in yet.
So was it locked or?
No, it's just one of those panels. One of those like doors you just put pressure on, and like a little spring pops it open.
One of the most interesting things that I had found, so I won't give all the details about the house because it's sort of a high profile place. It's a house, mind you, and there's a wing, and the wing stretches out fairly far, and at the end of the wing is a guest house. And I think it was probably for his practical reasons, I think. But there was a tunnel. There was this.
Oh, wow.
It wasn't easy to get into, but all of the utilities was in this tunnel. It was maybe 3 feet high, so it was quite interesting getting through it. It took me quite a bit of time. Yeah, going up into attics is my least favorite thing to do.
Oh, absolutely. Attics, crawl spaces, you're paying a premium if you want me to do that.
Yes.
You're also going to pay a lot if you want me to crawl through a 3-foot tunnel too, because I'm claustrophobic. So.
Yeah, this was a 10-day scan at least.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
That was a house?
Yeah, it's a house, bro. I can't even talk about it. That's how but it's gonna be amazing. Whatever it becomes of it. It's the kind of things that legends are made of, I guess you could say. But not talk about it.
Not really finding anything unsurprising, but a really interesting scan that I did was an abandoned brewery. It was about 120,000 square foot brewery that had been abandoned for about 20 years. And there was no electricity. There was a basement. And the basement was like wide open space. It had to have been a 30,000 square foot wide open space basement with absolutely no lights. There were pillars in there, and I could only see as far as my headlamp would show. And I'm down there just walking around, scanning, going around the perimeter, and I find this hole in the wall. I go into this hole in the wall, and there's a little bit of a tunnel there that leads into their room where they had like these big, had to have been, I can only estimate that they were probably 1,000-gallon drums where they used to brew the beer. That was pretty cool. That whole abandoned building, and teenagers had gotten there and wrote stuff on the wall. Like there was a mirror in one of the offices that said "Look behind you," and another wall said "Red Rum." It's just a bunch of stupid stuff, but it was a pretty interesting scan. I like abandoned buildings. Those are fun.
So you're out in the Midwest, which there's probably a lot of historic buildings.
Oh
Out
yeah.
here in my part of the country, which is Arizona, everything is relatively new. Everything's newer, newish. We don't have as many historic buildings. But what do you think is the future of this thing that we do? This LiDAR scanning, this reality capture stuff.
I mean, it's going to become more mainstream. Right now we still have to educate people on what we do and how we do it. Eventually, everybody's going to know. It's going to become, as architects, as the old guys age out of the business and the younger guys are coming in and they're, more up on new tech. It's going to become more mainstream. It's going to become more used. And eventually we're going to become commoditized, because other people will get into the business because it's a well-known it's a well-known industry now, or it will be at that point. So that'll definitely change. But as far as the technology improving, I mean, I'm sure it'll get more accurate. The SLAM scanners will get more accurate and faster. Like, they got the whole AI thing that I mentioned earlier, as far as like classifications and starting, the foundational building of the model for you. I've been exploring using AI, things that LiDAR is not necessarily being used for yet,
Really, like what?
to try to brainstorm. Well, I've got some really good ideas I'd love to talk to you offline about, but I
Okay,
don't know if I want
okay,
to
all
share them yet because
right.
you're not tapped into. So, you know what I'm saying? I don't know if I want to talk about it, but yeah, hop on ChatGPT and tell ChatGPT what you do and say, hey, are there any industries that this is like an untapped resource? And you can just start brainstorming off of stuff like that. It's pretty cool.
So speaking of ChatGPT itself, I'll say this in terms of like what's happened to me in my endeavors, both in real estate and in the 3D scanning company. I created my profile in both. I have like profiles for each of the companies in terms of what it does and its own chat bot or whatever you want to call it, profile.
Hmm.
So it knows what I do, right? And so like I've had people call me and say, "Hey, can you help me in real estate or can you help me in scanning?" And I'm like, "Well, how did you find me?" And they're like, "Oh, I asked ChatGPT." Like ChatGPT was a lead source, which was like I find really interesting because it didn't just happen once and it didn't just happen twice. It's happened at least 5 times now where somebody tells me they ChatGPT told them to call me. Like,
That's really cool.
yeah, like, there's something there.
Your marketing must be pretty good.
No, it's just like I think it's maybe because I've been using it enough that it knows what I do, and so people are using ChatGPT as their search engine. So as opposed, it's like Google's got to run for its money, So they're not like you could Google something or you can ask ChatGPT. And I think there people are
Sure.
using ChatGPT and then popping up with the suggestion, and I think that's like a lead source. I'm sure there's gonna be a future in that somehow. I
Oh,
don't know how, but
I purchased something online the other day, and sometimes when you buy something from an online store, it'll ask, "How'd you hear about us?" And it'll have a drop down with options. And this one actually had ChatGPT as an option to pick for "How did you hear about us?"
right. So what are we looking at here? Is this looks like a historic building?
So this was the first job where we combined the terrestrial lidar with the aerial lidar. So we used the aerial to capture the roof, which would have been a very difficult roof to scan. A lot of different dimensions and
How did
steep.
how did you handle the drift? Because I'm guessing the different levels of was it hard to align them?
No, there was no drift, fortunately. And like I said, like I said earlier, I used the BLK to go. I scanned, like probably 2 scans per floor on the interior. So let's say, here's the second floor. So I did, like probably this half and then this half, 2 separate scans that were connected via the stairway. There are 2 different stairways actually, and I had the 360 on a tripod go up both stairways up the spine of the building, like I was talking about earlier, to connect those together. So between the 360, the BLK to go, and then using the aerial lidar, it connected together really well. I mean, it created a pretty decent looking point cloud. If nobody's ever seen a point cloud, this is kind of what a point cloud looks like. It looks like a low resolution photograph of a bunch of dots, but every dot is a measurement where the laser hit the surface of something.
Do
And it
you
can measure.
so speaking of like how you use the approach of aerial and slam and terrestrial as an all encompassing solution for these bigger properties, do you ever include also a photographic panoramic component, be it like a video 360 or a Matterport tour just to have
Yeah.
a high
So
resolution visual?
back in the day before I got the BLK to go, the mobile scanner, I was going around with the BLK 360, and then my partner was going around with a Matterport to create a virtual walkthrough, which architects also find very valuable because the alternative is for them to go in and take a bunch of you know, two-dimensional photographs,
Yeah.
and then try to organize those by room, and then try to use those to imagine a three-dimensional space. The 360 virtual tour is far and above a better option, and I've had several architects hire me just for that, just for the 360 virtual walkthrough of the space that they're going to be renovating or redesigning. Once I got the to go, the Matterport didn't make sense anymore because it was too slow, right? So I would get the scan done really, really fast, and then the other person running the Matterport would just, I'd be sitting around doing nothing while she's Matterporting for the next few hours. So we moved to a service called Drone Deploy, which a lot of people use Drone Deploy for photogrammetry. They'll fly a drone and take 1,000 photos of an area, and photogrammetry takes all those photos and creates a 3D model out of those photographs. It's a really cool technology. But Drone Deploy also uses recently, I
Video?
say
Are
recently,
you doing the 360 video?
yeah, so you walk around with like an Insta360 on video mode, and it takes the individual frames and uses photogrammetry to create a blue line of the path that you took, similar to like Google Street View. What I'll do is I'll take a slice out of my point cloud to make a makeshift floor plan, and then I'll overlay that path on top of the floor plan within Drone Deploy. So now they can go and click on that blue line in any room that they want to see and be able to have that 360 view. The only difference between Matterport and that is with the Drone Deploy, it's a ton faster, but you're going to see the top of my head in every image.
Okay, that makes sense. That sounds like the right pairing.
It's not great for marketing. It's not super high quality, and like I said, you're going to see the top of my head in every panorama.
Yeah.
But it
This is
provides them what they
construction.
need, which is just seeing what's there.
Right. Yes. Right tool. It's the right tool for the right thing. So let's see. I have a terrestrial scanner, so I don't have the speed component. But I recently did a theater, a historic theater that was going under a renovation, and I did both, but a terrestrial LiDAR scan and a Matterport tour for added visualization, just as much for my drafting team as well as for the client, so that they have the visuals as a sort of a
Sure.
support to what they're looking at and planning.
That's a valuable tool. Absolutely. I
Yeah.
mean, I give that 360 walkthrough with every single job. It's not even an optional deliverable. You're going to get it. Mostly because my engineer who models from the point cloud also wants to see what's there. So I mainly do it for him, even if the
Yep.
client doesn't. So I
Yep.
always have it. So I have it, so I deliver it. It's just part of my deliverables.
Yeah. Yeah. So, my intuition about the future of what we're doing until we get replaced by our AI species overlords in the future, I think what we're doing is very valuable, and we'll figure out more ways to use it in everything that we do, both inside of a building, outside of a building, for every imaginable possibility that we need to plan things for. Like, I don't know, that sounds like a real vague statement, but planning to be in a space, to do anything in a space, essentially is what we can, these things can be used for, and that's
Oh, yeah.
a broad.
Well, there's a lot of ways that this can be used. So event planners, I mean, like big event planners, people that create conventions, right? They can actually use this technology to map out a space so they can create proper flow of pedestrian traffic, moving through this model. Because from what I understand, when people are putting together like a festival or a convention or something like that, they're actually required to show them, to show whoever the powers that be how this is going to be laid out, how people are going to be able to flow through there for emergency purposes, like how are they going to get out in the event of a fire or whatever. They have to show this kind of stuff, and we can provide that information very, very quickly.
Yeah.
So it's just one avenue that I haven't pursued that's wide open for people to take advantage of.
Yeah.
And you can do that with a Matterport. You don't need to be as accurate as you
Right.
do for architects.
So, I hope that the audience that has watched us talk in this hour that we've talked, some people will see some of this video, some of them will only see parts of it, but hope that you guys found a lot of value in the discussion that we've had, and maybe hopefully Matt, we can we can work on a project again soon, and then come together again and do another podcast to talk about what's going on in our LiDAR world.
Yeah, let's like the next big thing that happens. Let's get together and talk about it.
Okay. Well, thank you for making the time with me here this Monday morning, and hope you have a great week and a good June.
Thanks, Bryce. It's always great talking to you, man. Have a good one.